The Tertiary Education Trust Fund's Standing Committee on Research and Development is working to ensure that Nigeria's knowledge economy pays the proper dividend for economic transformation. The committee is working on several thematic areas, many of which can be tied to the Sustainable Development Goals. The paradigm shift will be focusing on some of these thematic areas over the next few episodes, beginning with agriculture. Agriculture is a branch of the economy in Nigeria, providing employment for about 30% of the population as of 2010. The sector is being transformed by commercialization at the small, medium, and large-scale enterprise levels. Food exports accounted for more than 70% of the GNP of Nigeria at independence. But 25 years later, it was almost a complete reversal, with food items accounting for over 50% of exports. Food output, however, declined after independence. Although many parts of sub-Saharan Africa were fertile and potentially productive, per capita food declined. Grain imports then increased more than 7 times. In 2019, the federal government continued with its reviewed focus on agricultural sector in an attempt to diversify the economy away from oil. The sector, which was neglected, has since 2016 become an option for diversification, owing to its vast potential to drive a more sustainable economic growth in Africa's most populous nation in terms of job creation and revenue diversification. To accelerate this growth, the government in the last 5 years has devoted a lot of energy at deepening agriculture with initiatives like the Anko Borrowers Program, the ban on importation of some agro-commodities, and the shutting down of its land borders. But now, its focus is on addressing the fundamental issues of mechanization, irrigation, seeds, extension services, insurance, research and development, amongst others. TETFund is playing its part to actualize the government's dream for low-hanging fruits of agriculture by boosting research and development. Professor Elias Bogoro, TETFund's executive secretary, sets the tone for this paradigm shift.
We shall work together in the next 1 week to deliver on the following major items. That is the committee, before they take recess and proceed thereafter. And I mentioned those aspects. 13 sector-based thematic areas have been identified by the committee preparing for the inauguration. And let me quickly read them. That is what the committee will be working on. These 13 sector-based thematic areas include agriculture, that includes, of course, climate change, food security, food science and technology, etc. Environment and biosciences. 3, medicine, one health, in other words, human, farm animal, wildlife health, etc. 4, pharmaceuticals. 5, ICT digital economy. 6, petroleum fossil resources, solid minerals and mining. 7, industrialization, manufacturing, trade and investment economy. 8, engineering, technology and mineral science development, infrastructure development, education, energy, governance, social development and internal security. Finally, not the least, defense and the military. The technical coordination team has been working at the back end to develop the appropriate tools, soft infrastructures, etc. And the committee will be available with what they have done. Let me quote Mr. President very recently. He said, "My administration will take concrete actions to correct the neglect of research, science and technology by past government. My administration will dedicate more resources and energy to the sector because no country could make progress without serious commitment to development of science and technology."
In 1990, 82 million hectares out of Nigeria's total land area of about 91 million hectares were found to be arable. 42% of the cultivatable land was farmed. Much of this land was farmed under the bush fallow system, whereby land is left idle for a period of time to allow natural regeneration of soil fertility. 18 million hectares were classified as permanent pasture, but had the potential to support crops. Most of the 20 million hectares covered by forest and woodlands are believed to have agricultural potential. Agricultural holdings are small and scattered, and farming is carried out with simple tools. Large-scale agriculture is not as common as it should be. Professor Bamiro, a professor of mechanical engineering and the chairman of TETFund's National Research Fund, speaks on the importance of industrialization. He also speaks on the agriculture value chain and why it's important to research into specific crops that serve different needs.
What is expected is a number of what we call value chain type of thing going on, in which take for example, when we said we were paying so much for importing wheat and that we could be making bread using cassava, we could be talking of cassava bread. That was being talked about 5 years ago or thereabout. And what happened? That would have been a fantastic impetus in agriculture. I mean, if you are getting, cassava bread and then people now being encouraged to go, but the question now is, the necessary input is not every cassava that you can use for cassava bread. Now, the species of cassava you can use for cassava bread, who's addressing it? Through research and development. Oh, nobody. It's not, you are not challenging your research community, to develop that. When you do that, okay, you have the species. Who is doing the extension for the farmers? To grow this and make sure that it's available. Even leaving that, who is looking at the technology for making bread from cassava? That is another, the value chain we are talking about. In other words, for you to industrialize, you have to take special knowledge of the inputs required in all these things, and if they're not there, forget it. There's no way you're going to be able to industrialize.
There is a genetic depression already, and nobody's talking about this. So these are things that, in essence, what you're asking me around knowledge is that when you have knowledge, knowledge is not tangible. It is an intangible asset. And being an intangible asset, it makes the value very, very high, and you can actually value it the way you want it. That's why when you see any project in this country, you're going to be hearing the amount that is being paid for consultancy. You're going to be hearing of huge amount being used for feasibility reports. All these feasibility reports and the technical report, whatever it is a product of knowledge. If you have your money, utilization of that fund required knowledge. And in the knowledge economy going forward, what we are talking about is that, yes, we are not going to be carrying crude oil. We are not going to be carrying maize. What can you turn that maize to? So who are those people that have those technology to turn maize to powder? And what type of powder?
TETFund, under the leadership of Professor Bogoro, was quick to recognize that without adequately funding research and development, Nigeria's dreams of diversification would remain a mirage. For this reason, it galvanized action to set up the Research and Development Standing Committee. One of the key differences with this effort is the prospect of sourcing funds for R&D.
There were attempts made in the past. From my experience when I was in the council, a major issue we had was the issue of funding. And when we talk about funding, we talk about government funding. And when you look at the funding of the Agri-Research Institutes in Nigeria, almost 80% of the funds go to salary payments, emoluments, and so on. And about 20% goes to the research component. Even that, you are talking about the physical component of the funding, like infrastructure and so on. But the actual amount of money that goes into research is less than 5%. So there was a need to have core funding for research. And I remember that efforts like this were initiated by the Federal Ministry of Science and Technology. And I was part of that. But somehow that did not see the light of day. And the key reason, I think, is because there was a concentration of efforts within the Ministry of Science and Technology. And what is different now that is happening is that TETFund has brought in the scope. And if you look at the people, the academicians and personalities that have been put together under this standing committee for research and development, it cuts across the entire spectrum of the economy. And we need to look at a basic framework that will be used to build the building blocks. Even if we're asking for increased funding, there must be a basis for that. And so what this group is doing is looking at who are even the stakeholders that we are talking about. What are the institutions that we are talking about in terms of R&D, both within the public sector and the private sector? And then we look at the quality of infrastructure that's available. And so we can aggregate that to see how we can now justify what kind of funds that are needed to really revitalize research and innovation.
For agriculture to assume its rightful place under the principles of R&D, Nigeria must be competitive and focus on not just selling commodities, but processed products.
The key solution will really be what I said, strengthening the capacity of the universities and research institutes to actually work directly with the industry so that the products of their research can be commercialized. That really is the problem. It's not that we don't have the indigenous knowledge of transforming these products, but the fact is that we must realize that we are also competing globally. And as long as we depend on food importation, I think prior to COVID, this country must be spending close to $10 billion annually importing foods. And many of these things, many of these foods we can produce locally. But if we produce them, the products may even turn out to be more expensive than the imported products, again because of the issue of economies of scale. So the real thing to do is to encourage this type of intervention that TETFund is doing, so that gradually we begin really to develop the local capacity to produce, in my own area, these food products. The food multinationals should be encouraged to work with the universities so that the products that are developed by the universities are taken up by the food multinationals and are promoted. Because at times, it's just really the marketing that makes the difference.
There was a lot of emphasis on value addition because most often we produce the raw products and then we export these products outside, and then they add value to the products and then bring it back and sell these products at very high cost, to us. So and it's one of the issues that we are looking at under the Agri Group, value addition. And if we do that, I think we can save a lot of foreign exchange instead of taking the raw products out and then, losing out in terms of adding value to the raw materials to get the final products.
Part of TETFund's paradigm shift is the triple helix method, which forges a stronger bond between the academia, the industry, and the government. In working together, these three critical institutions of society can lean on each other to create a prosperous economic ecosystem, which not only provides development, but also jobs. That not only leads to GDP growth, but to GDP growth per capita.
There's this notion that, that over the years, there have been efforts in terms of research and innovation in agriculture. And people talk about technologies or innovations produced, but that are on the shelves. There has been a disconnect between the scientists and the end users. And that mostly is caused by the fact that a lot of the researches that have happened before were actually not demand-driven. I think most often scientists want to enhance their careers. They want to publish papers and get promotions. So the emphasis is not really to carry out research that will be responsive to the needs of the end users. So we have to change that mindset so that we will be able to get technologies and innovations that will be useful to the people that will use them.
These people will do the research. They can come up with maybe what you call research result. It may be at a laboratory stage, that they have got that result. But that result that you have got is not yet, it's not yet in the market, ready for the market. It's not yet ready for the market. You have proved that yes, this thing is doable. But how do you now scale up in such a way that that result? Okay, let me take for example. I'm a mechanical engineer. We develop with the in a multidisciplinary research, we develop organomineral fertilizer from market waste and other things. We come up with that organomineral fertilizer at the laboratory stage. What did we do? Being the fertilizer, now we got our people in agronomy to go around ecological zones in Nigeria to see because people think they're fertilizer. No, they are fertilizer and they are fertilizer. It's not every fertilizer you can use anywhere because the soil conditions are different. Fertilizer is to correct certain deficiencies in your soil and not the same. So we went around the whole country. They came back with the different, elements missing. And in that plant, still at the laboratory stage, we were able to compose fertilizers for different regions. And the small quantity that we made at the laboratory stage, we started taking it to the different farmers and come and see the impact. Fantastic. So they now started coming to us to say, oh, they wanted more. They wanted this thing in many tons. But it's at the laboratory stage. So we didn't have capacity to now really manufacture. So if it's a country where you have investors, they will come and say, okay, how can we scale up the plant design in such a way that we can now, produce a lot more? That is where your development comes in. Now, to do that, Raw Material Research and Development Council, when they realized it, they came to to help us. They gave us 1 million naira to scale up the plant a little bit. Now we only achieve some kind of increase in capacity, but not enough. Until the state government or your state government got to know. And then they came in, they said, wow, our farmers have been on our neck, that they wanted more of these things. What could we do? We said, well, we just have to give us more money to be able to scale up. We have got the process technology. So Oyo State now gave us 10 million and some facilities to really scale up. And by the time we scale up, then we're able to produce a lot more. But then, that should not be the responsibility of a university. We expect the business climate for people to come. When you see, in other climate, you will see the business people, they will come in now. This is a product that will really make it in the market, to come now and be ready to take it away from us and now start, that is now commercialization. To now take it to the market and get it. Who says that, our farmers need this? We can even, surrounding West African countries, we can come to us for organic mineral fertilizer, because even in Europe now, if you are exporting some of these products, agri products, they will tell you that they prefer those that are organically, grown. And that was what we were aiming at.
TETFund is playing its part to position Nigeria as a major exporter. But there are fundamental issues that need to be addressed before agricultural produce from this country can be accepted and consumed abroad. Some of these can only be addressed with the knowledge provided by R&D.
Many of our food products may be rejected when we export them. And that is because, again, we don't pay attention in terms of quality, standardization. The World Trade Organization have requirements. For example, the sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Your products must meet those requirements if you want to export them. There is great abuse in this country today of agrochemicals, indiscriminate use of pesticides and other agrochemicals. Now, these chemicals are used worldwide. Indeed, without chemicals, we can't get the quantity of food that we will need to meet global food requirement. But in using these chemicals, the chemicals are regulated. In other words, if you use a pesticide to control, say, insect infestation, there is a level of the pesticide that will remain in food that must not exceed a particular level. But very often, because, again, lack of education in some instances, our farmers will overuse these chemicals so that the residues become higher than what is required in the product. That was exactly what happened to the cowpea export that you referred to. So some of this will come by way of education. Some of this will come by way of strengthening our regulatory agencies like NAFDAC, like SON. In many cases, especially for the informal sector, there are really no regulations. So if you are producing, for example, cassava turned into gari, okay? The NAFDAC regulation states that the gari must not have more than, 10 parts per million cyanide. But nobody goes around to enforce that. There's no enforcement. In situations like I've spoken of, where there are even regulations, the will, the capacity to enforce is not there. And in many instances, there are not just regulation. Anything goes. Everybody is into food production, food, whatever. And one must credit this administration for that, because I think it was just in March that the president approved by legislation the establishment of the Nigerian Council of Food Science and Technology, which will now regulate the profession of food science and technology. Before, we didn't have a council like that, and anybody can get into food, produce any type of foods without getting proper training. But this council will ensure that that will not happen. It will be it is the equivalent of COREN, like the Council for the Registration of Engineering in Nigeria.
The philosophy behind TETFund's R&D intervention in all sectors is to build a virile knowledge economy for the world's most populous African nation. Agriculture plays an essential role in this. The nation has already begun the journey from food importation to self-sufficiency, but it would need to rely on research and development to emerge as a major food exporter. And that is the paradigm shift.